we'll start biggest to shortest, I guess, for no good reason. So there's our Odachi.
Yeah. Now I can't give any feedback on how it feels or whatever, but it's
this
cool.
is another example of let's make it bigger.
Yeah.
There were actual time periods where the longer ones, like the Odachi or Nodachi, were the popular sword, and then they actually their preferences and style changed, and they actually started changing their sword fighting to be like, no, actually, we want to go with the shorter one, the katana or the tachi, and then at some point somebody's like, it'd be really cool is fighting with two swords, and
of course.
So it changed over time. but again, big huge sword, nice and flexible.
Yeah.
This is a big long one. We just brought back the ninja sword this year, the Ninjato.
So I can climb walls and stuff.
Yeah.
Real secret. Yeah. Very cool. I remember one of the first swords I ever bought when I was in college was like a $50 ninja sword.
This
and guess how it broke?
Yeah, right. Just snapped right off. The owner and founder of Sabersmith, Tim Lawler, was a huge Bruce Lee fan growing up and did, I believe it was Ishinryu karate. And so this was like his favorite sword, and it's kind of how things all got started. And he was like a hobbyist, made nunchucks in his garage and things like that as a kid. And, probably hit himself with them. I'm sure we all
like
did.
The texture.
Stingray skin.
That's cool.
It's dyed different colors, but Japan being islands, commonly used. The leather is actually less authentic because they use silks usually. But I don't know. I like the durability of the leather. But nautical, shark skin, stingray skin, things like that. They were fishermen. That's what they didn't have huge cow herds like our European ancestors. The katana, which is functionally the closest thing in their culture to, the long swords.
I think of all the ones that I picked up so far, this is probably the one I'd feel best fencing with.
Right.
So there's that. But yeah, I like it.
They're light and fast. There was a reason. I mean, some people hype them up as one of the best designs.
Yeah.
For what they're used for.
Right.
Yeah. Like I concur to a degree, but there's limitations on anything. And then, Walks, short sword, and Tonto, dagger. Which there's some longer. All these.
Of course. Again.
Everything. There's longer, shorter versions.
This feels really nice too.
Yeah. Well, in close quarters, something that size, or the short sword, or whatever, like, or like the cutlass that I held. It's like these are all things that if you were in tight spaces in a building, in a house, whatever. Yeah. The big long swords are great and all, but they're only so effective when you don't have the space to swing them around. Right. You did mention something about you guys do pole arm stuff too, right?
Yes.
So we have a basic quarterstaff. It's kind of where things start. We use oak.
Yep.
So this is just like classic basic quarterstaff, 6 foot.
So this is initially how I'd hold it, by the way. So these is not how it's taught.
That's more
most of the texts.
Asian inspired style martial arts, whereas this is more like spear fighting European. Right. Yep, exactly. I agree. But yeah, different kind of cultures and such. So that, and then we take that to kind of a mean level. These are the steel butt caps from our spears. Yeah. So that is actually a short sword pommel welded onto the steel caps, and it adds this extra oomph where if you hit with that is, like getting smacked with the pommel of a sword, essentially, because that's what it is. Then we have a few different designs of spears. The Yari, which every culture at some point said, let's,
put a knife at the end of a stick.
Yep. Yeah. It was effective. It got the job done. The shapes of the blades changed a bit over time. Don't stress. Rubber bands and blades don't hold up very well. But so we do a variety. Obviously, all these, same thing. You can pick and choose the details if you order one, whatever. And we do all of our own sheath and scabbard work here. Our most popular spear is the one that we label as a Viking spear, but so many cultures had something very similar to this. The Celts. But yeah, these are real popular. We just started doing these, I think, a year or two back, and all of our spears we build them in more European fashion like this with a collar design, whereas a lot of the Asian spears historically, they would have been using, instead of like oak or ash, they would have commonly done like bamboo or rattan or something like uber flexible.
Yeah.
And so then they slice that and like bind a blade into that. But the handles were like more interchangeable. It was like, if it snapped, you just take this.
If you've got the infrastructure for it. If you're just buying one for at home, of course you don't.
But this, we're trying to build them as durable as possible, and this works pretty darn well. I know the ceiling in here is not really tall enough for this. So then we do a couple curved ones. We got the naginata and the glaive, which gives you that option for more slicing.
The text I study, at least the left arm is the forward arm, which is sort of backward to some styles, I guess. And one thing that's really common in a lot of European pole arms, like you can see it with that one.
I brought that out to
is
show
those
off.
Extra projections and stuff. People always talk about, it's for ripping people off horses and stuff, and it is.
It can be used for that.
Most often, that stuff is for firefighting.
Oh, interesting.
Because your civic guardsmen, who are the guys with swords and everything else, carry halberds because you rip houses down when they're on fire. And that's how you stop a fire.
We used to make a Chinese kwando, which is essentially like a glaive, but it's got a big hook on the back. And there are a ton of glaives that have that as well, and obviously the halberd. I didn't have an assembled halberd ready, so I had the parts, so I brought one out to at least show it off. And then there's the glaive, if you want a little bit more mass to your choppy spear. And this was another one when I was looking through and designing this. There were so many variations. Some of them had a lot shorter handles. Some, all these spears, like they can range from, sometimes they're little 4-foot guys, sometimes they're 8 foot. Some of the pikes were 12 or whatever. So, we, silly thing, but we're also limited by how much can we ship? How are we going to transport it? Can it fit in the back of a truck to drive it to your nearest Ren fair?
I have in my backyard, wrapped in a tarp, pikes. We occasionally will do pikes in a park.
How long are yours?
We have 12 foot and 10 foot.
Yeah, and is a big
12
stick.
Foot is about middle size for a pike.
Yeah.
Most of the texts that recommend pikes are like 18, sometimes plus. And then they all complain because the moment you give a soldier an 18-foot pike, he cuts it down to like 14 or 12 foot because it's easier to carry. Because you have to carry it everywhere you go.
Yep.
So it's a different logistical culture. You have different reasons.
And it was the tactics of it was great. I mean, if you had a full pike wall with like those 18-foot pikes, the cavalry, the horses don't want to run onto those. So it did work, but I'm sure getting them, I've always been curious about that logistics of it, because that's part of the job of doing this and running a business that we operate in 9 different states and we ship to 50, is that we got to figure out like how do we transport XYZ. And so the next one that I'm going to show is our halberd. This is new this past year, and this is already sharp because it's just very difficult to sharpen when it's on the pole. So just be careful with it. But I had to figure out, how do I build this in a way that once it's done, I'll be able to send it to a customer. How am I gonna do it so that I can transport it to the festivals and so on and so forth. And that is a reality in how we design things. But I looked at a lot of different designs, and I already made axes with the normal forward curved blades. And so specifically to do something different, I decided to do this convex kind of design.
Yeah, that's a common. How do you attach all this? Because I know historically, historically it had to have been.
It was, but there's like different techniques and such. But but they're a very effective weapon. I joke that it's the indecisive man's perfect weapon, because it's like, I don't know if I want to stab, hack, slash,
do them all.
Just do any of them. And this is also then on a pole with the steel butt cap, so you can bludgeon as well.
So the modern firefighters still use a tool called a pike pole, which is a spear point with a backward-facing hook. And that's really common on lots and lots of different halberd designs in Europe, because again,
interesting. I had never thought about that the town guards would essentially be the firefighters of the town. That makes sense, but I don't think I'd ever really considered that.
There were in certain cities they would have had, you basically would have volunteered out of the militia to be part of like the special firefighting squad, which meant you would have had to have like buckets and ladders or whatever else.
Yeah, whatever the accoutrement was.
But it was when the city was on fire, you know, the bells would ring and you'd have to put your armor on.
You were the guy.
Help fight the fire.
So obviously, different cultures from what your specialty is. But this past year, we just started doing shields. Yeah, it is. So we did different testing and such, and we decided to end up going with 3/4 inch birch on these, and that means that's a 13-pound shield. Yeah. We build the straps on because, you know, if you're building your Ren Fair costume or whatever it is, you want to be able to have it. But I cheat, and so these are hex screws. So you can take those off if you're like a LARPer and you want it for that. You don't have to have the strap. You can also tighten it up and whatever. But we make, I don't know, 5 or 6 different designs, I think, of the Viking shield, and then an infinite number of color combinations you can have.
I like the boss. Yeah, I like how it looks quite a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
One theory about how they were used was that they were more or less disposable, and you sort of use the shield as a bit of a, you've got your sword, right? And I'm trying to use my shield to open their shield up so I can thrust through. And so you'd want it to be quite a lot lighter. But obviously, again, part of your costume, you don't want it to break apart the moment you take it out of your car.
But we tested it out a little bit, and if you actually were trying to do like shield wall, too much thinner and too much lighter than this, and you're not going to be able to like stop arrows or shield thrusts or spear thrusts or whatever. So it's like a balancing act of like trying to figure out.
No one knows for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of theories.
Well, especially when it's something like this that disintegrated.
Yeah.
You know, we have quite a few through history. Right. And we have the blades from different cultures. A lot of them are practically falling apart, but like, that is one thing that I saw a lot of is many of the swords that are still in good shape in collections were the ones that were made as collectibles for the nobles. They weren't the battlefield ones. The battlefield ones are when you're at the museum, are the ones that are like practically destroyed.
When we found at the bottom of a bog.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's our heater shield. Well, it's got the little thing on it here. Take that off. That's to hold it up on the wall.
Yeah, and I know some of them would have had actually like 2 different
handle options.
Yeah. Like you could kind of hold it
that way or that way, or
whatever.
Yeah, I looked at something like that too, and this is where, you know, coming up with designs that, you know, there's no way unless you're making it for the person, right? If I'm building it for you, then we can have a discussion, and I can say, okay, how do you want it?
Right.
But sadly, to be able to do something like this and run a business in the 21st century, you got to be able to say, all right, what's a good middle option that like will do the best? But again, we have 6, 7 different designs. We've got an infinite number of color combinations, different wood stains and things like that. And these, again, you know, built-in straps. So if you want to wear it at the fair, you can. But if you're using it for LARPing or sword fighting, you can take the strap right off of it, and they're durable. And I was chatting with you earlier when we walked around. I am playing around with how to do like steel shields and things like that. It's gonna be a little down the road because I got lots of other projects on my to-do list. But it is something that is on our brains that we are planning on playing with as well. See if I can get it back up there without knocking anything down. Haha! So this was one where when I started doing some research into bucklers, there's so many. There's so many styles, so many different sizes, different weights and everything. And I just had to say, you know what? I have to choose a design.
Yeah.
So this is a 16-inch, you know, primarily wood, but with the steel shield boss on there. We're in the sword shop, just so you guys know. So like there are lots of noises you're going to hear. That is because like we are actively building swords back in the shop right now. And this is not like a sound studio or whatever. We are not CG. Actually, if you like CG me, it'd be about 6 inches. No, I'm just kidding. But so this is our version of the buckler. We do a bunch of different designs, just like everything else. Yeah. But like this, you know, in my mind, I decided to go a little bit larger than like some of the fencing bucklers I saw, almost in the realm of like targes or whatever. Where, you know, this might be comboed with like a small sword, you know, whether it's like the Celtic tribes or the, you know, Irish, Scottish. They you know, all those different cultures seems like they had different versions of it. Some of them were leather, some of them were woven like reeds and stuff. There's a whole lot of versions, but all right. So then we on to daggers. We got the axes and things behind you as well. So our skin is like basic boot knife, and historically in every culture, you know, there were no multi-tools. There were no, you know, pocket knives like a folding knife or whatever.
I would count a halberd as a multi-tool.
Yes, but the halberd does qualify. But so
in your pocket.
You know, we build these to be a little bigger. Some of these were real small and they were like a sock knife. I go a little bit larger because I want it to be a little bit more of a multi-tool kind of thing where you could use it a little bit more usefully. Here behind you, we have our hand axe, which can be used as a throwing axe. It is solid steel. That spike on the back is pretty vicious though, so don't stab yourself in the shoulder when throwing it. But you mentioned like the boarding cutlasses or boarding axes were a pretty common thing as well. They got the job done. And then as a tool, like if you need to cut through a rope that's almost as thick as your wrist, you're not using a pocket knife for that. But we make a smaller, like what I consider like a normal size Warhammer. She's going to grab one out. But over the years, we've constantly getting requests for like, I want it bigger. And it's like, so I finally just gave in and I was like, all right, you think you want a big giant hammer. So this is 20 pounds.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yep. And solid aircraft grade aluminum handle. And then a solid steel head and spike and everything. And it is a beast.
Quite heavy.
Yes.
Historically, I know most war hammers would have been quite light, right?
Yes.
Like the weight at the end
like
of the stick.
A 5 or 6 pound hammer is a big hammer. So that does not mean that there weren't giant weapons. Every culture at some point, somebody said, make it bigger. And because most weapons in history were custom made, they very well might. If some guy just really wanted a giant maul, like they build it. But this is our normal spike hammer. That is a much more classic. Yep. That's like a 5-6 pound head. And designed so you could pierce through certain types of armor or just break their bones through it or whatever.
A big old concussion.
It doesn't, you know, even with the proper padding underneath the steel helmet, you get bonked upside the head with something like this. It's not going to go well. When we walked around the shop, they're actually working on a batch right now of solid steel ball maces as well. We've done a few of those over the years. We're doing a batch right now. And then we've also got solid ball steel flails that we're working on. We've had quite a few requests for those, so those are coming. Axes. So we've got 3 designs other than the hand axe. This gives you that piercing option with a spike axe.
This was great. This is really light.
After holding that, everything feels super light. It is true though that they are fast and light. I mean, just like pole arms, the majority of it's wood, and so there's not that much steel on it. And you know, we tell people like with our weapons, like don't go chop trees down. And the most common response, well, what about one of the axes? A wood cutting axe is a wedge shaped axe, and it is built specifically for that. These are battle axes, so they are a different type of blade. They're made to hurt humans, which is the reality. This is essentially the same thing, but with a double-edged blade instead of the spike.
Yeah, again, that feels really good.
Yep. Gets the job done.
Yeah.
But a very common thing also was metal was expensive and wood was functionally free. You know, you just went and cut it down, freaking grows on trees. So they, you know, like say we get a lot of times where people are like, oh, well, Vikings, you know, actually like the vast majority of them used axes. Like, you know, swords were expensive or good swords were expensive or spears was the other one. So, we make a few different designs.
Yeah.
Over the next few years, I'm sure we'll add some more axe designs for those of you who want lots more. Here's our dagger line. The 6-inch dagger is kind of the classic small medieval belt knife. You know, you'd use it as a weapon if needed, but the reality is they were using it for like everyday use. Right. And
everybody carried a dagger.
And then the slightly larger version of the same thing. There you're getting more into like, okay, feels more of a weapon if necessary, but again, it's just your everyday knife. And then lots of different cultures. The kukri originated in Nepal, the Gurkhas. and just a great bushcraft kind of blade. It was a cool design, and there's a whole physics thing about why it works better.
The weight concentration and so on.
Yeah. But and
I always
those
thought these were really cool.
They are. It's definitely a neat design, and when it comes to designing stuff, there's so much variety. Some of these, they got bigger and longer, and they're very cool, but trying to figure out exactly the right middle ground of all right, this could be used as a tool, but also fits into a weapon size, trying to find that balance. So we call our scimitar dagger. Our original scimitar blade, the sword, actually was that exact same design, just bigger. And then we redesigned the scimitar sword, but the scimitar dagger is so popular that we just kept it the way it is.
Yeah.
But it also is very reminiscent of Aragorn's knife. Is very similar, different crossguard and stuff, but same kind of shape. Although, I don't know about chucking it at an orc from 20 feet away. But
I'm sure your buddy will just carry it.
Exactly. I'm just going to knock it out of the air.
So many hours of my life watching the behind the scenes.
Oh yeah,
of the Lord of the Rings.
The sacks,
and again, just a belt knife.
Yep,
everywhere. Yeah, very cool.
And we've started redesigning the dirk. We made them years ago. They're a really common knife in different cultures, but our original one was essentially a longer version of the Skindu, and they just didn't sell well. And realistically, in the end, we're a business, so if something doesn't sell well, then go back to the drawing board.
Right.
And then you already saw the Elven dagger, saber dagger. A curved single-edged blade. Was a really common design. There probably would have been a million names for them, but really most of those names probably just meant knife. And single-edged knives are also really common, like kitchen knives, because if it's a tool first, single edges make more sense. If it's a weapon as well, then double edges, that's a whole knife versus dagger thing. Combat knife, that's more of a modern style knife.
Feels good.
Yeah. Classic, we get people that want a Bowie or a K-bar or whatever, and this is kind of halfway in between. Bodice daggers. So, in every culture, having some kind of small little thing, in the style, I've seen a bunch of different designs, like hairpins that were just really sharp on the tip, or little tiny things they'd have in their boot, or just stashed or whatever. But we do these. They're the only things we make out of stainless steel, so that they can be used as a hairpin or ladies, whatever. But it's kind of the equivalent of grab your car keys between your fingers and jab them in the squishy bits. Humans are squishy. So while she's grabbing that, we do custom work as well. And usually, to clarify that, to our own design custom work, where we come up with a design. Oh, cool. Here are the kunai. Here's the last couple little knives. We also do some throwing knife designs. This is our kunai. Original one is a little smaller, and then I did a larger version because people want that satisfying ka-thunk,
of course,
when they throw it at the target.
Right.
And that's literally why we did that size. But they work, they're small throwing knives. They're fun.
I'm certainly not an expert in throwing knives, but
it's fun.
Yeah,
I'm okay at it. I played around. I had a couple friends where we used to throw on a regular basis, and I got to the point that when I was at a single distance from the target and I knew the distance, I was okay. But the being able to switch it up, I never got that good. The people that are really good at that blow my mind. They're so crazy. So right now we have one really cool custom piece in here that I want to show you. We do get requests a lot to work in Damascus steel. We pretty much reserve that for when we want to, not for custom requests. We have kind of a partner company, some friends of ours that are specific. All they do is Damascus work. They're down in Alabama, and we will go down there and drink some moonshine and then get some steel. But they have the big power hammer.
This is all just from the weld or the
forging? From the layering.
Wow, that looks great.
And then we bring the piece of steel back to our shop and we make something out of it. So this is just a one-of-a-kind custom piece that one of my guys made. Cody, he did a great job, and it just came out gorgeous. We've got a Damascus Xiphos.
Stunning. That's beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is a $4,000 sword.
Right.
And we build maybe 5 to 10 a year Damascus full-size swords, and although it is functional, it could function, we do not carry a lifetime guarantee on custom pieces like this for a reason, because we're not going to rebuild this. This is it. This is a one-of-a-kind piece. If you buy it, it's awesome. It will work if and when you need it, but we do not want people taking these in their backyards and hacking at stuff with them, because if it gets broken, we're not replicating that. That's part of the like shtick,
the one of a kind.
Yeah, that is the one of a kind.
Yeah.
We also occasionally just do like one of a kind stuff out of like 1075. This is just a cool like feathered effect, just because it's fun. And again, more for the art than the function, because we already have a giant product line for the function. Here, we'll do the Elven sword first. This one, we just didn't have one in the rack earlier, but this is the big brother to that dagger. Again, that one is sharp all the way around.
Feels nice.
We don't do much in the fantasy realm because that's just not really our gimmick, but this and the dagger are cool. And this is historically accurate to the 4th era elven mountain elves of the homeland across the sea. I don't know.
What's called in Sindarin.
Right, exactly. Well, ironically, it'll probably just be the Sindarin word for sword.
Probably,
right?
Yeah. Which is not to be confused with the Quenya word for sword.
But yeah, we... So he just calls nerds.
What do you expect?
And then this is new this year. This is the Greek Xiphos.
Yeah.
And we just started building.
Yeah,
me too.
These look cool.
And ironically, Lord of the Rings, I think that whenever not necessarily in the books as much, they just kind of describe it more as like a short sword, but the one that they made for the movies, they ended up, I feel like it's very much
pretty
like
much, yeah,
a Xiphos.
the
leaf kind of, exactly. With a more artistic crossguard and pommel, but
no, I've always thought these just look really cool.
Yeah, and sword and board is definitely what makes the most sense to me for sword fighting, and ironically, somewhere between our buckler and our Viking shield, like somewhere in that range would be like a Greek shield and something like this, and they're just really practical. If they knew what they were doing, there's a reason that some of the most successful armies, sword and shield walls, like freaking worked. So so I have now tortured Adam to go through the entire product line. Thank you very much for coming by, Adam. We are just here every day building swords, right? For those of you that are in Michigan or nearby, we are about 20 minutes straight west out of Lansing, or about 40 minutes, give or take, out of Grand Rapids, depending where you are. And just kind of out in the country, literally surrounded by cornfields and in an old building that used to be a grocery store. But you are welcome to come by and see us. We're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 4 for the showroom. And if you want to make an appointment to meet us up on a weekend, you just have to reach out in advance and we'll try to make that happen for you. But we do have a showroom. You can come check out the blades in person. You can also just shop on our website, come see us at the festivals. If they are interested in, if they're in the Lansing area and they're interested in the Lansing Longsword Guild, how would they reach out to you guys?
So we have a website, or it's a Wix website, just Lansing Longsword Guild. Just look us up. There's a contact us panel right in there, and send us an email and we'll get to you. We meet Monday nights and Thursday nights in Lansing in gyms around the city. And occasionally we'll do things on the weekends. We run a tournament every year. We have all sorts of stuff. And we have a YouTube channel, Lansing Longsword, all sorts of stuff. So.
Awesome. And just say that if you are interested in either collecting swords or getting into sword fighting, there's so many resources online today. We mentioned earlier the HEMA Alliance is where you can find a club in your area. If you're interested in the European style martial arts, obviously there's all sorts of Asian inspired martial arts groups throughout the United States. We didn't really talk about it much, but there's a whole other group called the SCA, which is if you're really geared into the like kind of living in that historical era, different eras actually. There's groups all over the country. And then there's other things, the Buhurt, which is, armored up sword fighting. There's lots of options out there. So definitely look into it. It's can be a lot of fun. All right. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thanks. This was fun.